The intention to spend this meeting on taking you through some of the action points and discuss some of the action points from the leadership meeting that we had on a couple of weeks ago here, just so that you know what was discussed and also getting your input. You will of course get it more formally, and after that we will hear Gabriel a bit on the film festival, and then we will take it from there. But before that, I want to welcome Hannah. I don't think you... Where did Hannah... There you are. Yeah, yeah, welcome to you. And maybe you could say 2 words about yourself. You are with the communication team. And,
yes. So I'm an exchange student this semester at Lund, and I'm from Washington, D.C., right at the University of Virginia, studying foreign affairs, and I'm here until June, and been having a great time so far, and look forward to the rest of my time here.
Very good. Welcome to you. And also you, Benham.
Yeah, I'm Benham. I'm from Hagenes here in southern Skåne, and I'm studying welfare policies and management here. That's a master's, and yeah, I'm doing part-time now, and in March I'll start full-time till the spring, till the summer.
And also a very warm welcome to you. Good to have you here. As you know, we had, so that sort of rounds up the communication team. How, Gabriel?
Rounds it up?
Yeah, or do you have other expansions in the...
Yeah, we have lots of plans, but for the next couple of months, we'll stick with that.
Maybe you could say a few words on that? I mean, that we are now moving on to do some further recruitments in the communication as well to get that up and running.
Yeah, exactly.
Further.
So we'll be looking at that over the next couple of weeks and start a process.
Yeah. And then Martha Davis will be back, I think one of these days as well. Today, okay. Martha will be here. And then we have also another new face who's not here, who's actually right now in Geneva. We're very lucky to, on a very short notice, get Elaine Ryan on board to help us out on a paper that we are to submit to the Danish Foreign Ministry on human rights and corruption. She's here for a very time-limited period, for 7-8 months. And then, of course, we also hope that she can help us develop that program further. She has worked on this issue both in a UN circle as well as in Göteborg at the institute there with Bo Rothstein and his team, who are sort of very deep on that issue. So I think we've been extremely fortunate on being able to get Elaine on board. But you'll meet her soon. I think in the beginning of March. She's right now in Geneva with Michael to a big conference in Geneva on human rights corruption and the role of treaty bodies. So good. But what I had in mind was just to start out by a little story that came to me, and that is you see this young couple that I know walking down the street hand in hand, very much in love. So it's early days. And they walk in sort of a suburban area in Aarhus where I lived. And they look into a garden, so a house, regular house in this suburban area, and they look into the garden. And then this girl, she sort of breaks out spontaneously, says, "Oh, my garden should never look like that." And then they walk by and talk about other things. Then a year later, they get married. 2 years later, they buy a house, a nice house, sort of a suburban area in Aarhus. And they get kids, things move on. But this man, he's sort of a hard-working lawyer, spends a lot of time in the office, and then when he gets home, he starts gardening. He's just obsessed with gardening. And the garden just looks beautiful. Really, really nice garden. And then at a certain stage, one evening, when they get into a row, what happens in all families, and at a certain stage, he just burst out, "God damn, would you ever have time for your family? I mean, for the kids, for me, you're obsessed with this bloody garden. That you're always there when you get home from work, right into the garden, and in the weekends you're just in that garden all the time. I'm sick and tired of that garden. And then he looks at her. I said, God damn, so am I. I'm doing all this for you. Do you remember when we walked down that street and we looked into that nasty garden where there was weed all over and there was the lawn was not mowed and etc. And she said, what? Yeah, don't you remember when we walked down that street and we saw that nasty garden? Oh yeah, no, that's right. No, I didn't see that. I don't care about all that. I mean, that's fine with me. I sort of like the wilderness. What I looked at was the laundry. The laundry that was, didn't you notice that the laundry was there in all different colors and the white was not really white, it was gray. And I thought, God damn, I'm never going to have my laundry that way around. That would be terrible. That's exactly what a leadership meeting is about. It's not about getting long lists of what we are, sort of say, what sort of things to do, sort of the everyday work. It's very much about getting to talk, getting a sense of, do we actually see the same? Do we actually understand what we're doing the same way? Or do we actually work supposedly in the same environment, but in reality we are moving in different directions because we have different perceptions of what we're doing, what sort of organization it is. Like my good friends there, they sorted it out, and the garden after that sort of collapsed a little bit, and I think they moved into an apartment shortly after. But communication is extremely important. So sometimes when we have meetings, we are always sort of a bit obsessed, as we should be. Of course, we can also waste our time, but we're very obsessed of, we should really reach, we should have goals, and particularly the more Northern Europeans we are, the more obsessed we get. But we need to spend that time also just having free-floating discussions, not being too rigid on the agendas and very specific concrete outcomes, because that's in the end what really moves the organization, namely that we have that common understanding of who we are. I'm saying all this because there was one question in one of these discussions that we had during the leadership day, where we had that sort of open, we had both a focused agenda, but we also had quite an open agenda. So there was this space for these discussions. At a certain stage, one of the managers said, actually I'm a little bit, there's things I don't really understand. As a development agency organization, we should do this or that. Development agency? We are not a development, in my view, we are not a development organization. We're a human rights organization. And then suddenly it struck me, whoa, here we are on very different tracks. Of course we work with development, that's for sure. I mean, 85% of our funding stems from CEDA, and now also a bit from Danida and others. So for sure we work a lot in that field. But does that turn us into a development agency? Question mark. Yes, it may do. And that may be what we have chosen to be or choose to be, and it may not. But it's enormously important to discuss that. I mean, at the management, of course, if the management, the leadership of the organization is not on par, is not some way or another on the same track in terms of who we are, what sort of identity. And that is, of course, increasingly, I mean, the more you are in a change process, the more that sort of discussions are important to have. So that's very much the gist of why we met, and I must say the meeting really very much lived up to my expectation. I think we had a very good meeting. We got deeper into some of the discussions and some of the difficult discussions, and one of them being this one, which then came up, and And I think wouldn't say agreement, but at least sort of the understanding largely was no. I mean, we're a human rights organization, we're a global organization working in say, all the different regions where we have currently a presence, and should the sort of say the development paradigm fade away, I mean, we would, in my perspective, still be there. We are not in particular linked to a development paradigm, a paradigm that I firmly believe is on its way out for many reasons, global political reasons, but also that basically it has been very successful. So we have more and more mid-income countries moving out of being perceived as developing countries, etc., etc. So there are many reasons for why I don't believe in that concept in the sort of midterm, not to talk about the long-term perspective. And I think it also puts some certain perceptions of the world that may not always be very conducive for having partnerships, seeing our partners, our colleagues in a partnership way. So, and I think that is very much the journey that we are on in this transformation of creating a global organization, whatever that then means. I was just recently had a chat with a good friend from the UN, who said, whoa, what is it that you're doing up there? It's really interesting. We're starting following you up there because you're creating something new. And when you're creating something new, it is, the more we need that sort of discussions in order to have at least getting all the different perspectives on what is that something new in reality, and how do we create more flesh and blood, and also how do we speak about it. And I don't think we yet have really a clear language on what sort of organization we are, apart from sort of saying what we do, but can we in 3 words actually encompass all the different elements, say this is the sort of new type of organization, this is the brand of this new sort of organization. Question mark. I still think we are in that position. So that was one of the discussions, and intimately linked to that, we also continued the old discussion that we also had here, and that will continue throughout the coming months on are we monitoring, non-monitoring. I think everybody agreed we are not a classical monitoring organization like the UN, sort of collecting data systematically on specific situations, communicating it, reporting on it immediately to the relevant change makers. I mean, that's not really duty bearers. That's not primarily what we are for. So I think the focus shifted more into how do we comment on development? How do we discuss current development? So let's leave the monitoring behind us. That is more a question of how do we communicate again who we are. Do we communicate in a non-language in the sense that we communicate what we are not? So as has been a bit the way we have communicated hitherto, that we are a non-monitoring organization. And I must say on a personal note, it always sort of frustrated me a little bit by that you define an organization by what it is not, rather than it really being strong on what it is, and then getting that across. And then of course in bilaterals we can always take up sort of if we sit with a minister who is concerned of what we're doing, of course one can always say, of course we are not monitoring. I mean, it sort of goes without saying. But if we want to spread it out, fine. But is that communication? I'll come back to that in a second. So the big question is really, how do we comment on issue? What about the academic freedom? Can our researchers in the house do whatever they want in the name of the Royal Wallenberg Institute when we are not, so to say, when we are in difficult places? Really difficult questions, but so on the one hand, there was I think I can say, a firm agreement that we are not monitoring. I mean, that's sort of, I don't think anybody. And there was also a firm agreement that the academic freedom, that's of course protected. I mean, that it's there. So we have then in between here sort of the commenting part. And I think this is where the discussion is, both for the academics when they sort of step out of their professor academic environment, writings, and into the more popular space, commenting on current issues. Then what? What do we do? As well as others, not only researchers, but also others commenting on wanting to comment on issues. So that's a big discussion still, but I think we have really, via the discussions that we have had here in this room, as well as now with the leadership group and later on with the board, moving rapidly on that. And again, so important to take this time to get a common understanding, because it's so much about who we are and our identity. So, yeah, and then the last big pillar of the discussions related to the matrix organization of the interlinked awards. How do the team leaders and directors interact? I mean, who's making which decision? So in that light, you should see, and these are it's only the preliminary sort of action points. There will be a fuller list of some 25 points, but that's too much to take you through now. So these are just some sketchy points. So the first one relate to what I said. We need to develop language to use about our mandate in our general communication. Again, how do we communicate who we are? Quite essential for any organization. And then develop guidelines for decision making in relation to possible commenting. And that was sort of, I think, where we are at this stage in the discussion, namely that if people are called on to comment on issues which we know are controversial, difficult, can put our staff, and that is constantly the center of our discussion, not putting staff at risk. We do have staff in different places around the world, and by saying something in the Swedish media or somewhere else, we may endanger staff somewhere out there. And that is, in the end, part of who's making that decision on that. And then also an issue that's much wider, that we should be better in describing all the different communication platforms that we have, how we use them, and be stronger in communication than we are today, and also engaging the officers much more in communication. One of the elements that we talked about was how do we actually see the officers 5 years from now? Who should be there? Should they have a communication? Should they have a Gabriel in all at least the regional offices? Should they have researchers there? Should they in a way mirror what Lund look like today? Question mark. And I think there was quite a, let's say, general understanding, yes, they should. I mean, that is part of that global organization, moving away from the north-south economy, where Lund, the north, is sort of the place where all the expertise and the director and everybody sits, but it's sort of more spread out, and it's more interacting across, which I think is already moving ahead very rapidly. Then more internally, this one is ongoing, and it's sort of out of our hands to some extent, not to push it, but trying to get some more flexible planning cycle with CETA, that it's too rigid, in particular the annual sorry?
Work plans.
Work plans, yeah, exactly. The annual work plans, it says up there, which very often, I mean, delays the entire process, and actually makes it difficult. And again, so that's one thing, that's sort of a technical thing, a technical nuisance, but it's also enormously patronizing. come on, if we have a 5-year program, we worked with CETA for 30 years. They know us, they know you, we all deliver. So let's do those work plans. You have accepted the program, and then come back maybe 2 years into, or 2.5 years into a 5-year program, and make an analysis or make an assessment of where we are, and then let's sort of leave it by there. At that stage, or of course they can see, they can sort of, we can send in the work plans, but not for approval as it is today, where it actually delays. So that is, I think, an important part of our current negotiations with CETA. Then we have a number of guidelines established that we adopted last year, but a number of them are not in use. And we need to be stronger in communicating, so really implementing it. It's sort of the classical, you create guidelines and put them on the shelf, and then we're all happy with that they are on the shelf, but no, we need to make them living tools in the organization. Then there is something about the prioritization within the thematic areas. Not surprisingly, 1.5 years down the line, we have tested a number of avenues, inclusion, human rights cities, and the Inclusion Academy and other things. What is it? Gender equality, disability. What is it then? What transpires? What is it that we then in the end really want to focus on? We cannot do it all, so we have been in a way testing different elements. And of course, let's be realistic. One of the elements is also where can we get funding? So we're not totally. It's not only our choice, but there is an issue here of prioritization. Recruitment policy goes without saying. Find ways to enable, create space for the directors of offices to have more time to actually think strategically, develop the organization from their perspective, give them 10-20% space in the budget. Sure, create. That's back to what I said. What should the offices look like in the future on communication, on research? And that's basically go along the way, as I think we're already on a good track on having more and more, let's say, substantial discussions, and there was a clear call from the meeting to continue and deepen that. And then finally, role of team leaders and thematic experts, getting a time schedule for. And for me, it was extremely interesting just to see now this year, for I think most, not all, I think most of the team leaders, the demand for their services from the projects, and it's amazing to see, and that certainly gives us a possibility to gear the organization much better. When we certainly can see that there's when you call in from all the offices, how much is there need for mass work in the different places to support, and it's 150% or something like that. Then okay, because that is all funded, so the funding is in place. So in that way, we can say, okay, but that actually opens up for an additional recruitment in this or that area. So they've created that transparency in the organization and redirecting, as we started some years ago, of directing away from using our funding for external consultants out there, but actually directing it to our own experts and build up the expertise in-house. Not completely ruling out using consultants, but move not to the same extent. Build internal capacity by also enlarging the teams. On the first one, it's of course not only the team leaders, but also the team members, but also expanding the teams, strengthening the teams. So, bye. Okay. So that is in short. You will get it. We'll sort of edit it much more. There are many more, let's say, detailed points. I just wanted to show you what I consider some of the main points to give you an idea of what the discussions were and sort of where we're moving on some of this. Some comments, Johannes, Rolf, Gabriel, Gula, who were there? Anything I missed?
I think you.
Math?
I think you summarized well the discussions as far as I remember. I think there are some very sort of tricky issues regarding the mandate, as you said, that we need to come back to, and I think also staff will be encouraged to input on that, and maybe there are views already now on sort of the mandate issues and the commenting part that you mentioned. I think that is the critical issue, of course.
No, I think when it comes to the mandate, I think we were quite surprised because initially we thought that disagreement was much bigger. So I think we were quite surprised that we managed to nail it down to 5-6 points to further work on. So I think that was very constructive in the dialogue, and also not mentioned here, but there will also be new guidelines or policy when it comes to procurement and documentation for following the efficiency audit, which we haven't received the final report, but that's probably, well, it will be in the report. So that's something which will follow, and that will sort of create an additional burden on you to document things when purchasing or doing things with money. I think that's where we have to improve.
I think something that came out pretty clearly for me during the meeting was this gradually integrating process where currently there's a lot of funded initiatives, big CEDA programs where everybody's time is taken up doing what's already agreed. And then there's sometimes a question mark, how do you fit in then people on the move or economic globalization into something that's already settled? And for me, it seems that that's a process that takes a bit of time, but when we're thinking towards next year or the year after, looking for funding opportunities, that's how the thematic areas gradually, but not necessarily slowly, filter in. And it's at different stages in the different regions. So Asia got off the ground a lot with people on the move, economic globalization, so it's happening. And I think that's a good example of where it can really happen powerfully. But it's also happening, and there were opportunities at the meeting to see where other synergies could happen. And maybe another point related to that is how important it is for it not just to be driven by team leaders or anything else, but if we're thinking about these 4 thematic areas, it's great for all of us to be thinking about it and seeing the opportunities in the different countries and in the different areas that we're working. Oh, that's something that could work. Let's talk about it. So I thought that was really good. And I got a top up for that.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That's just what I...
Any questions? Or is it brilliantly clear? Or you
questions will come when the things will start developing and rolling. I think that between the mandates and so on, the details of accommodation and harmonization among mandates, brackets, pillars of the organization comes when we work together. So I'm sure that questions will fly after that. So,
but how do you see that sort of identity discussion from you, from the research perspective?
I think it's understandable why some colleagues thought that we have to develop an agency, because we have been tied with CEDA for many years, and that has to have an influence in the way that we see ourselves. And I think that's still prevailing in some of our colleagues. Change that take time. And that will change with as well the change of funds. If our ties will be less tied to CEDA, then our identity will develop to a different direction. But if that does not happen, then there is a challenge there. So identity doesn't change because just we wanted to change. Change because the way that we operate is different. So I think will be a process. We started, but we are in that process. And I think we need to be patient because it's tied to funds to a certain extent.
But you don't have to identify with your donor. You can
Yes.
sort of say take the donations and sort of say work with it
Yes.
in sort of say that identity you have. But you're right. I mean, it is.
It's a process. It's a
Yeah,
process
it
that,
is.
as you pointed out, it's easier to identify ourselves for what we are not. And
Mm.
that's happened in all aspects of human life. We identify first for what we are not, and then to find what we are, that's the difficult part.
That's a painful thing.
Exactly. And I think it will take time, but probably it will come. In the process of changing our core funds and finding and implementing new opportunities, and learning to work together in a different framework.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. But is it good?
No, it is. It's enormously exciting.
Exactly.
Right? Maybe also a bit scary.
Absolutely.
Okay. Emily?
No. I mean, nothing in general in addition to what you've said already. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and of course there's a process of change. The whole organization is in a process of change, but I think we also need to, or I find it's important to see what we do in relation to development cooperation. We have a strong added value in relation to the projects and programs that we are currently implementing, and that's something that we also want to continue because we feel that we can contribute to change in these societies that we are working with. So I think that's the balance to promote the new at the same time to also continue what we are currently doing and want to do as well in the development cooperation area.
Okay. No one else? Okay, but then let's move on. Gabriel?
Yes. Hello. Film festival we're going to talk about, which is now all set up. As of Friday, we have the final program set in place. So, it's from March 16th to March 18th. This is the film festival website, and I'm really excited about the films that we have this year. Many of you will be participating as well. So I figured what we could do real quick is go through the program. And all the time I want you to try to please think about how you can help promote, how you can help spread the word. If you have any ideas of specific groups we should target in connection to the films, because each film has like several very close thematic areas that we can touch on. So already we're talking to a lot of different departments who are participating at the university, the Gender Studies Department, Political Science, Sociology. So they're gonna help us spread the word also. And we have a plan in place to spread the word, but you're really important here. So one thing you can do just to start off before I get into the films is go into the Facebook page. And like it, share it, and also, I guess I have to be logged in. Like it, share it, and invite your friends. If you don't want to do, if you only want to do one of those, invite your friends. That's the most important thing. Invite your friends, ask them to share it, get them excited about it. All staff also has, like the last 2 years, 50% discount for tickets. So come to us if you want those, and we'll have little tickets, special little passes that you can use. Okay, so it's 7 films in total. The first one is called This Is Our Land, and it's a French feature film. And it's about how the Front National operates and is perceived, using anti-immigration, xenophobia, very pro-nationalistic tendencies to operate and to succeed. And it's a very, very interesting film. And we have a professor from the political science department who's looked into these things in Sweden, from a Swedish context, who can kind of relate back to how the Sweden Democrats work. And so I think that's going to be interesting. And her name is Katarina Kinnvall. So anything you could think around there, any different groups or friends who would be interested. We also have, which I'm really excited about, Carl Adam and Maria Green were at Spiken, which is a high school here, which focuses on human rights as part of our program where we're working with teachers and librarians to improve how they research and teach human rights in high schools. And so they got interested in this. So they created a whole curriculum around the film and are going to send 67 students and come, which we think is really exciting. So now we're trying to get more high school students involved. So that's the first film. Excuse me. And then after that, we're going to have the official party opening. So beverage and snacks. Unfortunately, they don't have liquor license, so it's going to be fake champagne. But yeah, there's always after the film. And Morten's going to speak and introduce, and also Eva Gustafsson, who's on the City Council in Lund, who we've been involved with and talking to a lot about human rights cities and other initiatives. And they're going to present the film. And then we have a documentary called The Venerable W, which is about Myanmar and the Buddhist monk in Myanmar who's stirring up ethnic hatred against the Rohingya. And really excited now that after that we're going to have Chris Sidote, who's going to speak together with Morten. He's an expert member on the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar. And he's coming from Geneva that morning, where he's going to issue the first report about the situation there. So he's going to kind of come with fresh news, and that's going to be really interesting, I think. So that's a documentary. So that's Friday. Real quick, I'm going to roll through these. Saturday is A Season in France, and it's a feature film about the refugee experience. It's about two African immigrant brothers and just dealing with the loss of leaving their country, the struggles that they go through. They're both educated and they have to work in pretty bad jobs, and just how that whole thing plays out. And Michael's gonna be involved in the Q&A after, and also Rahel Weldeab Sebhatu, I don't know if I pronounced that right, who's researching post-colonial, decolonial theory and international relations and migration and peace and security. So that's a really interesting film. It also involves asylum, because I don't want to give a spoiler alert here, but they're both trying to get asylum, and yeah, things don't turn out the way they want. So what are the implications of that? Which is very relevant, of course. Then Anita. I don't know how many of you know about Anita Hill, but this was a huge case in the 80s when the current Justice Thomas, who's the Supreme Court in the US, was appointed to be Supreme Court by George Bush the first. And it was George Bush, right? It wasn't Reagan. Yeah, it was Bush. And Anita Hill worked with them for years and claimed sexual harassment. And it was kind of like the first public reckoning with sexual harassment in the US. So we wanted to have that. It's never been shown in Sweden before, that film. And we wanted to have it in relation to Me Too. We tried to get Anita because Maria Green used to work with her and she was so close, but then she canceled. So instead we have Marta Kolan-Shiwich, who's a researcher at the Department of Gender Studies. And she's looking at social justice and law, sociology of race and racism. And she's also looked into what judiciaries can do or cannot do when it comes to sexual harassment and those issues. So I think that's going to be really nice. And Anna Bruce is going to be talking to her and moderating. Then we have a letter to the president on Sunday morning, which is also a premiere. This is a film about women's rights in Afghanistan. And we have a woman who's from Afghanistan, but she's been living in Sweden for a long time. Her name is Fareshta Begum, and she's started an organization called Women Building Bridges. And we got in contact with her through Ali, who was a participant in the Inclusion Academy, which is really nice. So he's also probably going to come. So they're going to give a really good perspective on the situation in Afghanistan. All these movies are super depressing. Sorry, we were trying to find a good one. That's probably one of the most depressing ones we have. The next one is neo-Nazis, as we That's weird. They own. Yeah. So this is Yeah, it's a documentary about the neo-Nazi party in Greece, but it's called Golden Dawn Daughters, so it's women in the party. And the director managed to get amazing access to that whole situation there. And we have Tina Skanias, who's a media communication studies professor at Malmö. She used to be at Lund, who studies extreme right-wing activists and propaganda in Europe, and specifically Sweden, so she's going to talk about that. And then finally we have Nimble Fingers, which is a documentary about Vietnamese workers working at a Canon printer factory. And it's about workers' rights, it's about globalization, it's about leaving the countryside, and we have the director for that coming. He's an Italian filmmaker and anthropologist. And this was recommended by Marina Svensson, who's at the Center for East and Southeast Asian Studies, and she's going to be moderating. So what we try to do is bring as much of the university together, because we know that we need to partner in order to get more people there. So that's the situation. Any questions or any good ideas for who to reach out? I don't know how much time we have. Maybe take, can we take 2 or 3 minutes? You could discuss amongst yourselves if you have any good ideas, and then come back. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. Something to be worried about that they're all depressing movies. But they always are if they're human rights. It's the nature of the beast. But on the other hand, I mean, if you look at the uplifting stories, leaders, human rights defenders who managed to change a very dire situation and by overcoming all difficulties come into a success story, that could be slightly more uplifting and also show all the difficulties along the way. Maybe we can select next year more films like that.
Measured his penis intentionally. The name that was referred to was Ron Dong. I was on trial. I've got statements from people in North saying, watch out for this woman. The issue became my character. It didn't occur to her that opposition campaign would create sexual violence. Why would someone make up this story? There's more speakers as well.
My lecture for Optimus Black after I have great physical capability and attitude.
A lot of facts that they didn't want to cover. This is an important issue, and the dialogue should not stop.
I think the collaboration with speakers, that sounds extremely smart move. It could be done with more high schools. And to me, that's a hugely value-added.
I think the students are coming to sexual yes, I am doing that. That's my understanding.
You should get Malmö involved.
Well, let me
the human rights system, we feel really good. Much more both the university, but also the NGOs. I mean, like there are so many, like the anti-discrimination bureau, like all those guys. I'm sure they're really good. If you get the teachers excited or the heads of NGOs, they will actually mobilize people and explain them why it's important to come. And I think if that is done systematically, I think we have a winner. I mean, you will have overflowing rooms quite soon.
And I think, the whole Me Too thing, it's such a big thing in Sweden now as well. It's being discussed everywhere. So,
let us cultivate a limited life to all regions.
We follow the Me Too hashtag.
To do not take evil lightly by saying it will never touch me. Even a bowl of water fills up eventually with drops of rainwater. And so the innocent one, absorbing a drop at a time, can end up filled with evil.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anyone? We don't have much time, but if you have any amazing ideas, throw them out. Otherwise, please send me an email. And also, don't forget to invite your friends. That's really the best. And come. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, please come. It's great.
And you buy tickets by doing it online?
No, what you're going to want to do is come to me, and then
Okay.
we'll take it from there. Just email me, and I'll set it up.
Very short, very brief. Something that worked very well in other film festival is a poster competition for high school students, where they compete on the topic of these movies. They create posters, and then those that has been selected as the most inspiring one are holding on the whole of the cinema, so everybody going to the movie can see them. And perhaps we can give them a sort of reward, like for example, 1 week internship at RWI or something like that. Which of course they will inspire them very much. That would be the way to perhaps get high school students excited about and get involved.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good idea. Come on. There was a lot of discussion.
Studentkårerna, student union bodies.
Yeah.
They are.
Also in Malmö, not just Lund.
Exactly.
And even Copenhagen, maybe.
Yeah.
Are you planning to do this thing with speaking with other high schools here in Lund? Because sounds like an excellent targeted approach to get big number of students.
We've very briefly talked to Katridral Skolan. Katridral. Yeah. I'm not going to try again. So maybe, but we had that relationship before. The difficulty is that they need to get them out of school, or we had to get it as close as possible to school, but we want to definitely do it going forward. So hopefully we could do more this year, but definitely for next year now that we have the concept, because he's created a lesson plan around it. So
I think if we target on the Myanmar, I think we can to the humanitarian organizations, both in Copenhagen and Malmö, Lund, simply make with Chris here and the fresh report and the film. I think you really could we have a possibility. Of course, they are very, very much. I can give you a list of the Danish ones.
Maybe make features with these small videos like we did with the hub opening of the people who will be speaking, because it seems like you have so many videos and people speaking. They can talk about a little bit about what they do. But
we're on that.
Yeah,
great idea. Yeah, we already did one. Who was it? Tana, who did we?
Ava from the society.
Oh, and also the director.
And also Percival, director of the
Yeah, so we're going to kind of roll those out during the. All right. Thanks so much, but please get back to me if you have any more ideas. And I have another bad news that they don't serve popcorn there. So you'll have to sneak it in.
Thanks a lot, Gabriel. I think this is extremely exciting, and also I think the good thing is also that funding is coming in better this year.
Yeah, a little bit better than last year, which is really nice. Hopefully more next year.
Are there posters?
The posters are in process of
printing today.
Yeah, so we got funding from Lund municipality more than last year, and also from Film and Skåne, which we didn't get last year, which was nice.
Yeah, good. But of course, contrary to last year, we're not doing it in Stockholm this year. We sort of said, well, let's limit it. Too many things on our plate. So of course, next year we may reconsider again to have it duplicated in Stockholm. So, great, good. But I don't know if there's something from anything else from your department, Gabriel.
on. We just got finished doing John Knox's, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Environment and Human Rights, issued a final report with these 16 framework principles, and we made an easy to read version of it, which is very, looks really good, and it has our logo on it, which is nice, together with the UN. And, so we're printing those up for Rolf to take to Pakistan on Friday, but also, right, is it Pakistan?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that for?
For a conference with under the framework of our regional program.
Okay. And then they're going to be widely disseminated, so we're going to put that on the website and everything. It's really nice to have our logo on there. So, yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff that we're working on, but that's one of them.
Very good. Johannes?
Nothing in particular. I think coming back to what you said earlier about bureaucracy, annual work plans, we're waiting for approvals of annual work plans. We got one approval so far, the Cambodia program, but others are hopefully in the pipeline.
Well,
no, nothing.
Ulla? Anyone else? Anything? Anything? Okay, but have a nice day, have a nice week, and those of you who are not on the sports law, enjoy.